Hi, Rens. Thanks
Good day,
again
Peter.
for finding time to do a follow-up session. Um, I
No problem.
improved, yeah, I improved a bit since we last met. Initially, I didn't feel like I'm improving much, but then I guess after a few sessions, I was able to find more time. I took I think the biggest changes were number one, I took your advice to not have my overall optimal
Mhm.
lap time in the delta bar. Instead, I switched to session optimal. And this way I could see throughout the session that I'm improving my lap time. So I think this was a very good positive feedback loop, just seeing the green more frequently.
Yep.
In terms of motivation, I think that definitely worked well for me. And the second thing is, and I struggled with it for a little bit, but I think I finally got a hang of Sector 4. That's the fast turn where essentially I had to trail brake more. And what I used to do is I used to tap the brakes and then turn. And then if I try to move the breakpoint further along, I was more likely to get oversteer, and then when I get oversteer, I had to apply counterlock, run out wide, so I was losing time, and then finally I realized that I can actually turn the car by just modulating the brakes and the accelerator. So
Yep.
I mean I knew the theory, but it took me a little while to just do it and then be able to repeat it. So I think that turn now feels pretty good. I turned the steering wheel just a little bit, and then it's mostly brakes and accelerator that I use to turn, and my traces look a lot more like Marty's. So I think
Yep.
those are the highlights.
And how did you find any improvements throughout the chicane or the
Um,
S-bend?
yeah, I found improvements there for quite a while. I just couldn't replicate the line. Um, I thought I watched the replay, but just I would always be further on the outside. I think I improved on that chicane as well, but I still don't have the consistency there.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Because I did notice when I watched your qualifying lap or one of the qualifying laps you did that you actually did improve significantly through the chicane alone,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of the lap was very similar in terms of lap time.
Yeah, yeah. I I don't know. It just I know what I had to do, but it took me a few sessions to get any improvement. I mean, even when I know the line needs to be different, and I watch the replay, and seemingly, I think that I actually make a change, but then when I look at the data, it's all the same. So I mean, improvement can't always happen instantly, but that was puzzling me. Why would I think I'm actually changing my line, and yet looking at telemetry, it was still the same? Do you have any? You know what I
Uh,
mean, right? Any tips on that?
Yeah, well, that's probably because you're more conscious of what you want to, or yeah, just what is going on. So um, you just actually get a lot easier once that all comes sort of automatically,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not have to think about it, what you need to change,
Mm-hmm.
because then you actually maybe by just being more aware of something,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you think something goes differently, which is actually then something what you do normally as well,
Mm-hmm.
or very similar normally.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of racing lines, for example, for a couple of laps, always try to consciously hit the same curbs or the same markers, but try to make that line your natural line,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't really have to think about it next time,
Mm-hmm. Okay,
and not
so
and not necessarily directly try to directly improve and go fast. Just try to adapt to the differences you need to make.
mm-hmm. So I guess if I'm looking at the average lap, I guess it would take a while for the average to actually change because I need to get used to the new line. So what you're saying is stay focused on the markers, and then over time, if I'm able to hit them, then the average would change as well. But it won't happen. It won't happen instantaneously.
Yeah, if you're really looking to do something differently, try to do it really conscious at first.
Mm-hmm.
But don't really. It is really hard to actually improve while doing it that way because you're just simply thinking about it too much.
Mm-hmm.
So always just sort of try to turn it into a sort of more of a natural habit.
Mm-hmm.
And always, what also can help in terms of racing lines, for example, is always try to look where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So not necessarily try to look or try to focus really close in front of the car, but try to focus a little bit further ahead on the track.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I've definitely noticed, for example, if I'm focusing too much on my marker for the breaking point, if I don't move my sight towards the apex, then I just essentially I don't know what I'm doing through the term. It's like a mechanical turning mechanically instead of really turning with knowing exactly where I am and how I'm turning.
Yeah, again, it's also something you don't want to be too conscious about, but um, when you're, for example, on a straight, then focus on your braking zone or look at your braking marker.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you get close to that, you sort of want to focus already for the apex.
Mm-hmm. So you're
So
already looking past the next marker.
yeah,
So
don't focus too much on the actual markers because
mm-hmm.
then yeah, it just comes at you too quickly, even in a slower car.
Mm-hmm.
So try to focus a little bit further ahead on the road.
Mm-hmm. So what's the feeling then? Do I sort of know, okay, that's where I need to brake, but then I don't look at that spot. I s-
Well, you will. It's not that you not look at it completely. You will still see the markers and stuff in your peripheral vision, but you're just
okay,
simply not focusing at it too much.
okay. So be aware of that marker in my peripheral vision, but don't really stare at it.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
okay, okay, cool. I had a few questions. So number one was I forgot to ask you last time. I noticed that Marty hits the rev limiter at a few corners, and I think in one corner it's just very briefly, in another one it's like for a couple of seconds. Um, why is he doing this? I mean, if hitting the
Um,
rev limiter would potentially lose you a little bit of time.
yes, but no, I've not driven this car myself here.
Mm-hmm.
But even in the faster cars, you do this sometimes, and uh, it. I guess it actually costs more time to shift up
Mm-hmm. And then
than
down.
and then back down again,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even have to brake a little bit earlier with maybe a slightly higher speed.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's very little or no difference, or maybe it's even slower to shift up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Okay.
then just leave it on the limiter, you always yeah, you will always for one approach with the same speed, which can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So you will always have the same speed before you're braking.
Yeah. So is it? Oh, I guess yeah. That gives you more consistency if you always have the
Yep.
same speed. Is that something that you find out by looking at the telemetry, or is it something you can intuitively know?
I usually do it based on feel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess if you really want to make a lap perfect, you can do it by telemetry,
Mm-hmm.
but usually it's done on feel, and it's also a bit driver dependent.
Okay.
Some drivers like to do it sometimes a little bit more than others, I guess.
Yeah. So some rule of thumb, if let's say I'm only going to upshift and be in the higher gear for I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, then it's not worth it.
Yeah, I would say for about if it's shorter than 2 seconds, then it's definitely not worth it.
Okay.
Well, definitely, then it's not worth it. But
Yeah.
it's a bit hard to judge because I'm not necessarily familiar with the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
it's something like that, and it's I guess it's quite easy to judge from Marty's replay
Mm-hmm.
for how long he banks on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rev limiter. That's sort of
Yeah. So what I noticed, again, same sector 4, if I in the sessions I did with lower track temperatures, I could actually get more speed um, through the turn. So I was hitting the rev limiter for a few seconds. I don't know if it was 2, 3, how many, but just because I was used to this rhythm, I didn't change my shifting. But maybe I should have in the different weather conditions if I'm hitting the rev limiters for, you said, more than a couple of seconds.
yeah. That obviously can be different in different weather. I mean, Zandvoort, for example, when you go out of a slower corner with a little bit faster speed and carry more speed onto a straight, at the very end of it, you obviously have more speed.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, when you normally would maybe be just on the limiter with faster weather and a higher speed on the straight, it might be worth it to do shift up. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's basically always something to do or to try to do when you shift up just before you have to shift back down again.
Mm-hmm.
Then you might be thinking the next time, well, maybe I just don't shift up that last gear and see how that
Mm-hmm.
goes.
Okay, okay. So the default should be upshifting. Upshift when you approach the rev limit, but uh, then skip that upshift if you actually notice that it's a very quick sequence of upshifting, downshifting.
Yeah, I would from the start. I would always upshift when you need to shift,
Got it.
and then when you notice that it's only for a very brief upshift,
Mm-hmm.
then you can try to leave that particular shift out of the
Okay.
next lap.
Okay. And I suppose I could use the delta bar to determine if I'm actually winning or gaining any time
Yep,
by doing that.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Got it. Um.
Also, even for the delta bar, what you said earlier that you use the optimal from the session,
Mm-hmm.
I would still advise to actually use the session best lap and
Mm-hmm.
not the optimal lap.
Okay.
And simply because of the fact that the session best lap is an actual
Mm-hmm.
full lap,
Yeah.
and your optimal is are sectors from different laps.
Yeah.
And depending on the track or depending on how the sectors are laid out,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes by overshooting one sector,
Mm-hmm.
what would normally be very slow in the next one,
Mm-hmm.
you might actually set a very fast
Yeah.
first half of those two sectors,
Mm-hmm.
and then a slower one. But in your optimal, it is still counts.
Okay.
So it turns into a lap that is a bit unrealistic sometimes,
Okay.
or can be.
Yeah. 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 And I guess just psychologically, even if 1 or 2 turns were not perfect, that gives me a little bit of that green moment, that acts as motivation that, yeah, I can do yet better.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Okay.
you can actually just improve that particular mistake that you made that in a best lap,
Okay.
and just keep improving from there.
Okay, cool. I'll try that then.
It's something that just works better for some drivers, including myself.
Okay.
Uh, Running a best lap versus the optimal is
Okay.
I prefer the best one.
Yeah. So looking at my notes, I had a question about um, how to find more time, but maybe we can go over the sort of general questions first. So I did a few race sessions, and I think every single one, my starts were just terrible. I would lose positions at the start. And I guess I know the theory for the Skippy is that once you what's it called? Once you have the gray lights, when the lights are actually off, you change into first, You hold down the clutch, you're on full throttle, and then the moment the lights go green, you just lift up the clutch and essentially start accelerating, upshifting, and all that.
Yep.
But for some, I think at first I wasn't full throttle. I was hearing the rev limiter I was hitting the rev limiter, but I don't think I was full throttle on the pedal. Um, what 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 should I be doing? How do I get the best start of the line?
Well, with that car, I would indeed just have my foot flat on the accelerator,
Mm-hmm.
first gear, and just dump the clutch so that basically the clutch go as quickly as you can.
Mm-hmm.
If it then still bogs down or it still drops its revs, basically,
Mm-hmm.
what you can do is basically really quickly press and dump the clutch again.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets a sort of sort of second start.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as it starts rolling, you really quickly press and press the clutch again, and then let it
If
go.
I get wheel spin,
Well,
or
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that car does get wheel spin
mm-hmm.
on the line.
I guess not. But then what would I'd just like to understand what's the effect the pressing the clutch again would have?
Well, it would raise the revs for a very brief moment
Uh-huh.
when the clutch is pressed,
Okay.
and then you basically dump the clutch again. So it will get that drive from a higher rev. So it will get
Uh-huh.
a little extra burst of power. Sort of.
Uh-huh. Okay. And I
And
only do
that's I think what most people do in that car. I mean that's sort of the technique in the C spec, which is a similar
uh-huh.
kind of starting thing where you also have the foot flat
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes have to dump the clutch sort of twice.
Okay. Okay, but that's only sort of in the first few seconds on when I'm in first, or would I do this sometimes when I'm in
No,
second or
I would only do this in first gear.
okay.
I would say as soon as you even and only when you have really low revs, so when you don't
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
accelerate and you see
Okay,
the
I see.
and you see the cars around you do accelerate,
Uh-huh. Okay.
then you might want to try to really quickly
Okay.
uh, dump the clutch again.
Okay.
And not take your foot off the throttle. So
Yeah, yeah,
just
got
keep
it.
your foot flat and
Yeah. And is there any trick when actually shifting from first to second to third to not lose time in the shifts?
um, uh, do you use sequential
Yeah, paddle shifters.
pedal shifters? Um, well, I think it's only lifting what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the Skippy, I learned
Um,
that last week. It's enough to just lift the throttle a little bit.
and I think you can basically press it
Mm-hmm.
before lifting and then lift and then it shifts.
Yep, yep, yep.
And that's basically the quickest way.
Okay.
Sort of pre-selection basically.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm still losing time, if I sort of upshift quickly, I guess the point at which I upshift, how important is it to upshift at the correct RPM?
Well, it can be quite important. I'm not entirely sure what the right RPM is for that car.
I
Might
think
be something.
Martin mentioned it was 6500 RPM.
Yeah, I would always try to aim to get that
Okay.
because it's quite a low speed car. The last thing you want is actually lose momentum.
Mm-hmm.
You just lose a lot of time.
Okay. I actually need to double check my notes. It was either that's the rev limiter or that was the um, optimal power range. I'll go back look at my notes, but it's probably 6,000 to 6,500. Cool. And then I guess the last thing would be reaction time to the green light. If I do everything else right and I still get past, that means I'm not quick enough um, at the actual green light.
Um, yeah, reaction time. It's yeah. is always important. It's not necessarily something I guess you can really practice.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to be as alert as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And with the green lights, something I was always wondering is, should I actually look at the lights or should I look forward and only use my peripheral vision?
um, that's a good question, actually. I personally do look at the lights.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're actually in the back of the field, you might actually look a little bit more in your peripheral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think if you just focus on the lights, and as soon as the lights go off, you focus around you, then that should be fine.
Okay.
Uh, Nothing should be happening when the lights are on red anyway. So
Yeah. Okay.
um, once in a while, I guess you can see a car do a jump start.
Yeah. Yeah.
But apart from that, yeah, there's nothing really happening. So
Yeah.
I would just focus on the lights.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. And I also noticed that especially if I'm in a train of cars, I just lose my rhythm and I can't really do the laps that I know I'm able to do. For example, I can't repeat my qualifying time, or it's difficult to repeat my fastest lap of the race.
Yep.
I just something happens to me and it's like I don't feel it anymore. Um, and it's like half a second or a second difference. And I did a quick search through the forums. I guess that's not an unusual problem. What are your tips for dealing with this?
Well, for one, it's very difficult because usually when you're in trainer cars, you do want to get past. However, if they're a really similar speed and you actually can't keep up, um, don't try to mimic their driving lines necessarily, which is
Mm-hmm.
very easy to do. It's very easy uh, to try to follow them exactly,
Mm-hmm.
but try to sort of look through them
Mm-hmm.
if you can,
Mm-hmm.
and just basically just focus on your own, just on the track as you normally would.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, sort of try to ignore the car in front.
Mm-hmm.
It also depends really how close he is. If he's really close, that's of course a little bit difficult to do
Yeah.
because you need to react to him sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but I would always just try to focus on the track and not on the cars.
Mm-hmm.
So just focus on the point you normally would focus on. So
Okay.
just still try to look for the apexes
Right.
and still try to look for your next braking marker.
Right. I guess this makes sense because if I'm looking at different points around the track, then I'm not driving to what I practiced. If
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You just would be doing your normal driving as you normally would,
Mm-hmm.
other than the fact there's a car somewhere.
Yeah. And I think psychologically, what's even more distracting is when I have someone close behind me, and when I start to see their noses sticking out. Even though, I mean, I have the spotter on, it doesn't say that someone's on the left or on the right, but I think just knowing that there's someone sticking their nose, I think that makes me actually take a wider line or just be more cautious, which causes me to lose even more time.
Yeah, no, that's not a very difficult thing. What the best thing is, I mean, for one, you always need to be aware of the cars behind you,
Mm-hmm.
but try to not pay too much attention to them. So try to look at your mirror in a sort of peripheral vision kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
and know they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's very tricky because sometimes yeah, some drivers are a little bit erratic, so
Mm-hmm.
you just need to keep an eye on them. But if you can basically trust the guy behind you, just try to do your normal driving. And if he's
Mm-hmm.
really quicker,
Mm-hmm.
um, don't necessarily fight him too much because at some point he will get past anyway. And the harder you try to stay in front the more time you lose. Also, if you obviously pay too much attention to him, you will start to lose time. So just focus on your driving and try to actually drive away from them.
Okay.
Just try to drive your lines as perfect as you normally would,
Okay.
or maybe even more so.
Okay.
That's also yeah. It's very easy to try to brake a little bit later than you normally would if there's someone close.
Yeah.
And if you're really afraid that they will stick their nose in or they will dive you, if you defend early enough, always let them go the long way around you. If you know you're similar paced,
Okay.
or like I said before, basically just let them go and let them either go quick and hope you can follow, and maybe you can then get in his rhythm and maybe even repass him again.
Okay.
But don't try to. Just always make sure you can do your laps in a race.
Yeah. Yeah. So key takeaways for me are keep looking at the same places I've looked at during practice. Otherwise, this could be a reason why I'm losing my rhythm, just because I don't have my markers and reference points, and I'm not used to. Essentially, it's in a sense a different track if I'm not looking at it the same way.
It's also very easy to get drawn into someone else's mistake.
Yeah.
So when someone then maybe misses braking zone where you normally would be able to actually make your make your move, then you actually make the same mistake and still end up behind them.
Yeah.
So always try to look through the cars and just focus on the track.
Okay, and then secondly, I need to still be aware of the cars before and behind, but then mostly do that using peripheral vision.
Yeah, don't focus on them too much.
Yep. Okay, cool. I think that's the questions I had, and then the final one is how do I find more time? So I figured out that this so Marty's data pack is actually from last season, and this season the track is faster, maybe at least half a second, if not more.
Yep.
So and Marty is on vacation, so he can't really turn a new session. But essentially at this point, I'm matching his, or maybe even a little faster than him compared to his last season data. How do I find time if I don't have a comparison? I guess that's a good problem to have, but
it's that's for one, that's a very good problem to have. But I will show you. Let me do this real quickly. And now you should be able to see my screen.
Yeah, I do see it.
Okay. From temperature, this is similar.
Yeah.
This is qualifying session you did.
Yeah. The setups are actually the same. There is a bug in how the setup date is reported. So the
I
setups
guess it's done during the lap, from what I gathered.
Yeah, it's just the dump is based on the car physics while the car is not in the garage. The actual parameters that are modifiable on the car are all the same. Anti-roll bar, fuel level, brake bias. And
Yeah, exactly. All
yeah,
the new non-moving parts basically all are similar.
yeah,
I
yeah,
already noticed this.
yeah, yeah.
Well, for one, you made a very nice improvement from the last time you tested to qualifying.
Yeah,
Very close to 0.2% almost.
yeah.
It's nice. But I reckon there's actually another dent in there.
Uh-huh.
From what I've seen.
Oh, okay.
And there's the corner. So you should have your. You might have not have this lap as your all-time best lap because you did a race which was quicker, so you might have actually improved that one.
Yeah, yeah. Race was in in different weather, and this is actually a time trial, so it's default weather, just more. I think a little bit more rubber on the track.
Yeah, but I think if you what I think is happening at the moment, you try to find more time by just going that a little bit quicker into corners. So there are a few places where you actually slightly too quick in. One of them is turn 3.
So just carrying more speed from the previous turn.
Yeah, but try to slow down just a split second earlier. That will help you carry actually more speed through it. You go slightly quicker in.
Yeah.
And I lose the speed through.
Yeah.
And that's in the turn 3. Do the same in the second to the last corner. The blue line is your fastest. And this is a test one.
Yeah.
So you see, you try to go a little bit faster in.
Yeah.
Which helps, but you also lose it on exit. So try to avoid this while improving.
Okay.
And also, I'll make sure this is perfect. So, and then if you just, for example, then load up VRS yourself and look at your lap versus the last one, you notice that your apex speeds are getting actually lower.
Yeah.
And it might be that you're going in too quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So always try to slow in, fast out. It's a good old cliche, but
yeah,
it's definitely sort of a golden rule.
Okay.
So if you basically can mimic this lap, but just in those few tricky places where it's very tempting to go in a little bit too quick.
Yeah.
Go a little bit slower.
Yeah. And
I guess be able to actually get sub.
Am I coasting a little bit more here or no? Actually to the
No, you're actually
counter.
just braking harder.
Okay, braking harder and then I'm faster on the throttle.
Sorry, you're braking earlier.
Earlier and less, okay. So it looks like maybe a little bit less brake pressure, yeah.
Yeah, but earlier.
And then actually I'm waiting longer before I'm fully on the throttle.
Yeah, you wait a lot longer. But you carry just a lot more speed through.
I see, yeah.
You're also able to hit a little bit a better line.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually being more patient through the turn, just coasting a little bit more.
Yeah, and also make sure you get as close to the inside curb as you can. Without hitting it.
Yes, yeah. I think I step on it frequently. So
this is a corner that that probably also will help with consistency if you get a feel to always get the same angle through it.
I guess yeah, that reminds me of another question I had. Turning the car by essentially changing the balance, the weight, moving weight back and forth using the brake and throttle.
Yep.
Is that the kind of turn that I would do that?
Yeah, that would definitely be a corner where you would use the weight on the nose to get it to get the turn in. And basically, the more it does it, the more it rotates, then the nicer it will be, because the sooner you get the rotation through here, the earlier you basically have it straight for the next one.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't start to actually slide, You want as much rotation as you can through here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as straight as possible, as early as possible before the next one. So this is actually as fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go faster on exit, and
Mm-hmm.
that would all help.
Yeah. So is there a turn where this technique doesn't work? Maybe a sharper turn or a lower speed turn, or should I try to apply this everywhere? Essentially,
Um, yeah, no, it should sort of work everywhere.
because I guess the feeling through Sector 4 is that it almost feels like I know I'm turning the wheel a little bit, but it almost feels like I'm turning it just very slightly, and then I'm mostly applying the brakes is what makes the car turn more, rather than me turning the wheel. Um, do I explain it right?
Yeah, but I mean, there are always places where you can have it too much, or too much rotation. But yeah, I think it sort of applies from very slow corners to very fast corners.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I think it's a technique that works everywhere.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't want to slow down too much to get the effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at some point, the corners, I guess, can be too quick to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah, it's a technique that works very well.
Okay. Okay. So I'll try that in this second turn. So I guess the trick for finding more time is finding other fast laps and seeing what is the difference between the fast laps. Because I try looking at the optimal and perfect, but it's what you describe very frequently. It's a different line, different speed, so it's not necessarily something you can. It's
Yeah, I
not
would always try to improve from real laps. So I always compare real laps.
okay.
An optimal lap or an average lap is a really good sort of good target,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just based on the lap time.
Mm-hmm.
But to compare can be
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
very tricky sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's perfectly possible, but sometimes it's just not easy to do.
Yeah. Okay, so that's another tenth. And looking at some stats for the Skippy this week, I think I would have another half a second to find somewhere. I don't know what those guys are doing, um, and I guess very few go that fast. Um, and I don't think I'm really gonna have much time to practice more this week. But how I mean, how do I find yet another half second?
Well, if this is the first real week that you're back sim racing, if you get within a half second of those guys or the fast guys, that's for one. That's really impressive.
Thanks.
But
I'm
how do you find half
surprised.
second? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it's a matter of driving harder in a way. Just try to eke out a little bit more everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So and how I would do that is I would get the exit as perfect as possible. So I would sort of maybe even ignore lap times while
Mm-hmm.
testing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but just see where I can get green on out of corners
Mm-hmm.
compared to my fastest lap.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere I can get green,
Mm-hmm.
I would try to get then during the same session to hit green
Mm-hmm.
uh, by braking a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the exits perfect.
Okay. So number one thing I should try is slower in, faster out. Just brake maybe a little
Yes.
bit earlier and see if I can find more speed on the exit.
But if you do that in a new test session, you will then have a new lap time, which may even still be slower than your previous one.
Yeah.
And what I then would do is try to improve versus that lap time.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of ignore the other faster maybe lap.
Mm-hmm.
You can even replace it in the sim.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you should have then that session best lap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would try to improve without going slower on the exits.
Mm-hmm.
So always try to make sure you either still hit green, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but never red on exits.
Okay.
And just try then to basically get the green earlier and earlier through the corner.
Mm-hmm.
But I would always start in making sure you get the right or the perfect exit speed out of corners.
Yeah. Okay.
And obviously you have a very good base to do that from.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So even though if you want to do it like that, you might start over. You might even uh, be quite a few tenths off if you then try to improve that lap
Uh-huh.
while doing what you've learned or how you
Mm-hmm.
normally drive.
Mm-hmm.
But you sort of combine the two,
Mm-hmm.
then you should be able to find even more time.
Okay, so just to recap to make sure I understand it. So I start a new test session, start from a blank slate for the delta bar, so session best. But then I try to brake a little bit earlier than what I'm used to, and I try to get a green delta bar.
Yeah, I would first start versus your lap that you have now.
Uh-huh.
Um, although that might now be because you did a race where you
Uh-huh.
did a 53
Yeah,
4.
I think I should have I'm uploading the blap and olap files after each session, so I can go back to this one and download.
Okay, if you download the 55 3
Okay.
and then you load up a test session,
Uh-huh.
that would actually be better because then you actually have it as your what's it called, reference lab.
Yeah.
And then try to if you try to find time or improvements on corner exits.
Mm-hmm.
So see if you can improve
Mm-hmm.
the exits,
Okay.
and don't really focus too much on not losing time on entry.
Got it. So
But just make sure you have the exits right.
got it. So I take this fast reference laps, and then I don't care about a a red delta bar on the entry and mid turn, but I really want to get the green delta bar on the exit of
Yeah,
all the turns.
yeah. It turns green as soon as you start to go faster than that reference lap.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're slower;
Yes. Yes.
it
Yes.
will
Got
still
it.
turn green.
Yeah. And I would do that by trying a different line or trying to be on the throttle sooner. I
Yep.
just got it. And then when I go back to the telemetry to compare the laps, I would see I can compare my previous sort of reference lap to the new lap and see what I do different to get more speed out of the turn, and then I can try to merge the two essentially. I
Yeah,
can
you
see.
could. Yeah, exactly. You can do that by telemetry, just to see what you do differently.
Okay.
You can do it on feel. I mean, you sort of know what you did before.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to see what you or feel really good what you're doing differently.
Get it. Okay.
But telemetry is a really good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you find a few places where you can do that, as an example, the last corner main straight. So basically second to the last corner,
Mm-hmm.
last corner main straight will be a good place.
Yeah.
Out of turn one, it will be a good place.
Yeah. Because those are the longest straights, and that's
Yeah,
where I would get the most time. Yeah.
exactly,
Got
exactly.
it.
And basically, once you will be able to maybe find one or two of those places, or maybe on all those places,
Mm-hmm.
then try to basically get the green
Mm-hmm.
further and further
Mm-hmm.
back through the
Mm-hmm.
corner.
Got it. And just to set my expectations right, that's a kind of improvement that would probably take even longer. So I shouldn't expect necessarily results within like only an hour of practice, right?
Um, Well, sometimes it's just really really hard to change your driving line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes it's also something to get a feel for, and that's what I mean. You're only back for the first week,
Mm-hmm.
so the more you drive, and especially the longer you drive, the more you get used to it, the more you find
Okay.
little tricks in terms of how you can feel the car,
Mm-hmm.
or how you can get the rotation in.
Okay. Okay.
I
Cool.
mean, maybe it pays off, for example, in some of the corners to be a little bit more aggressive initially on the brakes,
Mm-hmm.
which gives even more weight transfer, even more
Mm-hmm.
rotation.
Mm-hmm.
That those are little things you can try to play with.
Okay.
Uh, Maybe use some of the inside corners, see if that actually gets some of can help you with getting the car rotated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it actually hurts the lap, but that's all things you can try.
Yeah, got it.
Don't be afraid to try different things,
Yep.
especially in private tests. There's
Yeah.
nothing holding you back really.
Yeah. Cool. That's very insightful. Thanks a lot, Rans. I don't think I have any questions for now. But yeah, that gives me a lot of things to work on.
Okay.
All
Oh,
right.
glad I could help you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thanks for taking the time, and talk to you soon.
Not a problem. All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.